Block 1. The scent of pine and frost clung to the air as I slipped through the forest, my footsteps barely audible against the cushion of fallen leaves. To move like a ghost, to exist without leaving traces, this was what 10 years of silence had taught me. For a decade, pretending to be mute had trained me to express without exposing the one thing that could destroy everything I'd built, my voice, to communicate without sound. Over the Packlands, winter was settling, and with it came the preparations for the claiming ceremony. As I entered through the servants' entrance, the great hall buzzed with activity, my head bowed as always. No attention was paid to the mute girl with pale blonde hair who served the meals and cleaned the floors. By design, I was invisible, by necessity, forgettable. "Arya, there you are." Hannah, the head kitchen maid, gestured frantically toward a stack of plates. "The Alpha delegations arrive tonight. Everything must be perfect." I nodded, reaching for my worn apron that hung on the wooden peg by the door. As I bent forward, my grandmother's silver pendant swung from my neck, the only possession I'd managed to keep when I fled my home pack a decade ago. The crescent moon etched into its surface had nearly worn smooth from my nervous habit of rubbing it between my fingers when anxiety threatened to overwhelm me. The night she died, my grandmother had pressed it into my palm, whispering, "Your voice is your power, little one. Guard it well." If only she could see me now. Chaos reigned in the kitchen. Wolves in human form rushed to prepare for the most significant event of the year. The claiming ceremony brought together unmated wolves from all packs. But this year was special. This year, the Alpha King himself would be present, searching for his mate after years of solitude following the death of his intended bride. My hands steady despite the tremor in my heart, I kept my eyes down as I arranged delicate china plates in precise formations. 10 years ago, I had run from my fate as a rare Omega wolf, one whose voice could soothe even the most savage alpha rage, one who would be claimed and used as a political pawn. For 10 years, I had been pretending to be a beta with damaged vocal cords, worthless in the hierarchical world of werewolf politics. "Did you hear?" whispered Mira, a young kitchen helper whose excitement made her practically vibrate beside me. "The Alpha King has never taken another mate because they say he's waiting for an Omega. They're so rare now, almost extinct." The crystal goblet in my hand nearly dropped, caught at the last moment. Too caught up in her gossip, Mira didn't notice my reaction. "They say he can sense an Omega from miles away. That's why he's touring all the packs suddenly." Her eyes gleamed with romantic notions. Imagine being claimed by Alaric Grey himself. All too well, I could imagine it. That was why I'd been running my entire adult life. In a flurry of preparations, the afternoon slipped away. By dusk, the great hall had transformed into a glittering showcase of power and wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped with light. Under silver platters, long tables groaned, and the air was perfumed with the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine. Trying to remain unnoticed, I moved along the periphery, straightening tablecloths and polishing already spotless surfaces. Into my hands, Hannah thrust a serving tray. "The delegations have arrived. You'll be serving the high table tonight." My blood froze. The high table meant proximity to alphas, to their heightened senses and scrutiny. Frantically, I shook my head, gesturing toward the kitchens. "Don't be ridiculous," Hannah scoffed. "You're the neatest server we have, and you won't embarrass us by chattering." "It's decided." Through my dress, I clutched my grandmother's pendant, feeling its familiar edges press into my palm. A single night of bad luck threatened 10 years of safety. The great door swung open and the procession began. First came our pack's alpha, Magnus, with his mate, Victoria. Behind them streamed the visiting alpha pairs, each adorned in their pack's colors and insignias. I kept my eyes lowered, focusing on the polished floor as I took my position against the wall, the tray balanced expertly in my trembling hands. A hush fell over the room. With sudden weight, the air seemed to thicken, pressing against my skin. Even without looking, I knew who had entered. I could feel the shift in energy like a physical touch. Alpha King Alaric Grey. Against my better judgment, I allowed myself a glance. He stood in the doorway, taller than any man had a right to be, his shoulders broad beneath a black formal jacket. The color of midnight was his hair, swept back from a face that seemed carved from stone, all sharp angles and uncompromising lines. But it was his eyes that caught and held me. Even from across the room, I could see they were the silver of a winter moon, cold and searching. Those eyes swept the room, assessing, judging, until suddenly they stopped on me. Immediately, I dropped my gaze, but the damage was done. Like a physical touch, a phantom finger tracing my spine, I felt his attention. My hands tightened on the tray until my knuckles whitened. "Don't notice me. Please don't notice me." With excruciating slowness, the dinner proceeded. Mechanically, I moved between the kitchen and the high table, serving wine with downcast eyes, never lingering. Yet each time I approached, I felt those silver eyes tracking my movements. Once, when I leaned forward to place a platter of roasted venison before him, his hand brushed mine, a touch that seemed deliberate in its casualness. I flinched back, nearly spilling the dish. "Careful," he murmured, his voice deep and smooth as aged whiskey. It was the first time I'd heard him speak, and something inside me responded to it, a flutter beneath my ribs like a caged bird testing its wings. Without meeting his gaze, I gave a quick nod and retreated. Hours later, when the plates had been cleared and the formal toast made, the dancing began. I used the opportunity to slip away to the kitchens, desperate for a moment's respite from the weight of the Alpha King's attention. Against the cool stone wall, I leaned, closing my eyes and drawing deep breaths. A warning I couldn't ignore, the pendant felt hot against my skin. Why does a serving girl wear silver of such fine craftsmanship? My eyes flew open. Alaric Grey stood in the kitchen doorway, his massive frame blocking the exit. We were alone. Panic clawed up my throat. I shook my head and gestured vaguely to my throat, the universal sign I'd used for years to indicate my muteness. Studying me with unsettling intensity, he cocked his head. "Magnus tells me you've been with this pack for 3 years. Before that, no one knows where you came from." I shrugged, keeping my expression neutral despite the hammering of my heart. He took a step closer, then another. I pressed back against the wall, but there was nowhere to run when he stood before me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. He reached out. I flinched, but he merely touched the pendant at my throat. "This is a royal crest," he said softly, "from the northern packs that were decimated in the wars." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to speak, to defend, to explain. His silver eyes narrowed, and he leaned closer, inhaling deeply near my neck. I trembled as his nose traced the line of my throat, a traditional wolf greeting that was far too intimate coming from an Alpha King to a supposed serving girl. "You hide your scent well," he murmured against my skin, "but not well enough." In horror, my eyes widened. He knew. Somehow he knew. "I've been searching for you for a very long time," he continued, straightening to his full height. "The last Omega of the northern packs. The one who disappeared the night her family was slaughtered." Tears burned behind my eyes. With each word he spoke, a decade of secrets threatened to unravel. "Tomorrow we will speak," he commanded softly, "and you will tell me why the rightful heir to the Northern Territories pretends to be a mute servant rather than claiming her birthright." He stepped back and something in his expression shifted, a softening around the eyes, a curious vulnerability that seemed at odds with his power. "Until then, little ghost." He turned and left as silently as he'd arrived, leaving me shaking against the wall. Sleep eluded me that night. In the servants' quarters, I paced my tiny room, panic and possibility warring within me. He knew what I was, an Omega, yes, but also something more. The daughter of the slain Northern Alpha, a princess in hiding, presumed dead alongside her family. But he couldn't know everything. He couldn't know why I'd hidden my voice for so long. Why I'd fled that blood-soaked night with my grandmother's pendant clutched in my fist and her final warning echoing in my ears. They hunt Omegas for their voices, and they will hunt you most of all. As dawn broke over the mountains, I made my decision. By the time the Alpha King came looking for me, I would be gone, disappearing like the ghost he'd named me, leaving no trace for him to follow. I was halfway through packing my meager belongings when the screaming began. Through the early morning quiet, the screams tore, panicked, desperate cries that sent ice through my veins. I abandoned my half-packed bag and rushed to my window, peering out at the courtyard below. Wolves in human form were running, some shifting mid-stride into their animal counterparts. Guards shouted orders, their voices tight with urgency. Through the chaos, I caught fragments of terrified conversation. Attacked at dawn, the border patrol, all dead except my heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a random attack. 10 years of running had taught me to recognize the signs. They had found me again, the silencers, hunters who trafficked in Omega wolves. Away from the window, I backed, my mind racing. If I fled now in the middle of chaos, I might escape both the hunters and the Alpha King. But as I turned toward my pack, a pounding at my door froze me in place. Open up. By order of the Alpha King, my fingers instinctively flew to my grandmother's pendant. 3 sharp knocks followed. Then the splintering of wood as the door was forced open. 2 royal guards stood in the doorway, their expressions grim. "You're to come with us," the taller one said. Now. There was no time for resistance. They flanked me as we moved swiftly through the servants' corridors, past wide-eyed staff and warriors preparing for battle. Not toward the main gates, as I'd expected, but deeper into the pack house, down staircases I'd never been permitted to use, until we reached a heavy iron door. One guard pressed his palm to it, murmuring words in the ancient tongue. The door swung open to reveal a war room. Covering the walls were maps marked with red pins and black lines. Around a massive oak table stood the Alpha leaders, their faces drawn with tension. At the head stood Alaric Grey, his powerful frame rigid as he bent over a map, silver eyes flashing as he issued commands. The moment I entered, those eyes found mine. Something passed across his face, relief, perhaps, and something darker I couldn't name. "Leave us," he ordered. Immediately, the room emptied, the other Alphas filing out with curious glances in my direction. When the door closed behind the last of them, we were alone. "You were packing to run," he said. Not a question. I remained silent, clutching my pendant like a shield. "The same people who murdered your family have found you," he continued, circling the table toward me. "The silencers have been hunting Omegas for decades, but they've been particularly determined to find you. I need to know why." I took an involuntary step back, my shoulder blades pressing against the cold stone wall. "I need to know what makes you so valuable that they would risk attacking a pack under my protection." Upon me pressed the weight of 10 years of silence. I shook my head, gesturing to my throat in the familiar denial. His hand shot out, gently but firmly grasping my chin, tilting my face up to his. "No more pretending, little ghost. People are dying. My people. Your people." Something broke inside me then. A dam holding back a decade of fear and loneliness. The first sound that escaped my lips was a ragged sob. "They want what's inside me," I whispered, my voice rusty from disuse. Speaking felt like swallowing glass. Each word painfully formed after years of deliberate silence. The voice of an Omega is powerful. But mine is different. At the sound of my voice, his eyes widened slightly, his thumb unconsciously stroking along my jawline. "Different how?" I closed my eyes, summoning courage from some hidden reserve. The northern packs had a prophecy about an Omega born under a blood moon who would carry the voice of compulsion not just to soothe Alphas, but to command them. As though burned, his hand dropped from my face. "That's impossible. No wolf can command an Alpha against their will." That's what my father believed. The memories rose unbidden. The night of crimson moonlight, the smell of pine and frost so similar to this place, the metallic tang of blood. Until I accidentally commanded him to stop beating one of our pack members. He froze mid-strike, unable to move until I released him. Understanding dawned in Alaric's eyes. "So you ran, not just from being claimed." "I ran because my father planned to use me as a weapon," I finished. "And when he couldn't control me, he arranged to sell me to the silencers, who collect Omegas with unique abilities. The night they came, my grandmother helped me escape. Everyone assumed I died in the attack. The room fell silent, save for the distant sounds of preparation for battle. The length of the chamber, Alaric paced, his brow furrowed in thought. "Show me," he finally said, turning to face me. I shook my head. "I won't use it. Not ever again. People are dying out there," he said, his voice low and intense. If what you say is true, you could end this without bloodshed. Or I could become exactly what my father wanted, a weapon to be wielded by whoever controls me. I stepped away from the wall, finding strength in finally speaking my truth. The moment I use my voice, I expose myself to everyone. The silencers will never stop hunting me. Alaric ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in the tense line of his shoulders. Then why did you stay in wolf packs at all? Why not disappear among humans? The question caught me off guard. It was something I'd asked myself countless times over the years. Because I'm still a wolf, I answered softly. And because I hoped to find a place where I could belong without being used. Something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look suddenly younger, more vulnerable. He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. What's your name? He asked. Your real name? I hesitated, understanding the power in such a simple question. Names had meaning among wolves. To share my true name was to offer trust one wasn't sure I could afford. Lyra, I finally whispered. Lyra Moonrest. He repeated it, the syllables rolling off his tongue like a caress. Lyra. Then, surprising me completely, he took my hand in his much larger one, turning it palm up. With deliberate care, he pressed his lips to the center of my palm, an ancient gesture of sworn protection among royal wolves. I swear on my crown and my life that I will not use you as a weapon, he said, his breath warm against my skin. But I cannot stand by while my people die when you have the power to save them. His sincerity shook me. 10 years of running, of trusting no one, had not prepared me for the raw honesty in his silver eyes. Before I could respond, the door burst open. A blood-spattered warrior stumbled in, his eyes wild with battle fever. They've breached the east wall, he gasped. They have weapons, silver-tipped arrows. We've lost 12 already. Alaric straightened, the vulnerable man vanishing beneath the mantle of the Alpha King. Evacuate the young and elderly through the tunnel system. All warriors to the east quadrant. The messenger nodded and disappeared. Alaric turned back to me, conflict clear in his expression. Stay here, he commanded. This room is warded. No one can enter without royal blood or permission. You're going out there? I asked, surprised by the surge of concern that flooded through me. A grim smile touched his lips. I don't send my wolves where I won't go myself. He moved toward the door, but I caught his arm, the contact sending a jolt of awareness through my fingertips. Wait, I said, take this. I slipped my grandmother's pendant over my head and pressed it into his palm. It's been a protection charm for generations. He stared at the silver crescent, then carefully tucked it into his pocket. I'll return it to you when this is over. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the fortified chamber with nothing but my troubled thoughts. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. The sounds of battle reached me, even through the thick stone walls, snarls, screams, the distinctive howls of wolves in pain. I paced the room like a caged animal, my newly reclaimed voice trapped in my throat. I could end this. I could stop the bloodshed with a few carefully spoken words, but at what cost? The decision was taken from my hands when the iron door swung open. I spun around, expecting Alaric, but instead found myself facing a stranger. A woman with hair the color of wheat and eyes like chips of green ice. Blood spattered her leather armor, and a cruel smile played across her lips. The little Omega princess, she purred. At last. Fear froze me in place. How did you get in here? She held up a bloody hand, revealing a deep cut across her palm. Royal blood opens royal doors. Did your grandmother never tell you about your father's half-sister? The one he banished for challenging his rule? My aunt. The one my grandmother had warned me about in whispered stories. The wolf who had aligned herself with the silencers out of spite and vengeance. You led them to my family, I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. You helped them kill everyone I loved. Not everyone, she countered, stepping closer. I kept looking for you. For 10 long years. Why? I backed away, my eyes darting around the room for a weapon, an escape route, anything. Because you're the key, dear niece. Her smile widened. The voice of compulsion, the power to command alphas. Can you imagine what that's worth? Kingdoms, territories, alliances, everything can be ours. I won't help you, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. She laughed, the sound brittle as breaking ice. You don't have a choice. The Alpha King will die today. He's outnumbered and surrounded. You'll come with me, willingly or not. As if to punctuate her words, a bone-chilling howl rose above the chaos outside, a wolf in mortal agony. The sound tore through me, and somehow, instinctively, I knew it was Alaric. In that moment, everything changed. The fear that had ruled me for a decade crystallized into something harder, sharper determination. My aunt must have seen the shift in my eyes because she lunged forward, a silver dagger appearing in her hand. But she had underestimated what 10 years of survival had taught me. I dodged, using her momentum against her, and slammed my elbow into her temple as she passed. She staggered but didn't fall, whirling back toward me with a snarl. Little, she spat. I don't need you unharmed, just alive. Another howl cut through the air, weaker this time. My heart constricted. I stopped running, stopped dodging. I planted my feet firmly on the stone floor and raised my chin. You wanted my voice, I said, power thrumming through my veins as I embraced what I had denied for so long. Let me give it to you. The air between us thickened, charged with an energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. My aunt faltered, wariness flickering across her face as she sensed the change. Sleep, I commanded, infusing the single word with all the power I had suppressed for a decade. Her eyes widened in shock before her body crumpled to the floor like a marionette with cut strings. I didn't wait to see if the command would hold. I already knew it would. The voice of compulsion was not something that could be resisted, not even by an alpha with royal blood. I stepped over her unconscious form and moved to the iron door, drawing a deep breath to steady myself. For 10 years, I had hidden. For 10 years, I had been silent. Now I would be neither. The corridor outside was deserted, but the sounds of battle grew louder as I ascended the stairs toward the main level of the pack house. The metallic scent of blood grew stronger with each step, mingling with the acrid smell of smoke and fear. I followed the chaos, moving against the flow of wounded wolves being helped to safety. Nobody stopped me. In the confusion, I was just another figure moving through the halls, no longer invisible, but not yet recognized for what I truly was. I emerged into the main courtyard and froze at the scene before me. Bodies lay scattered across the once pristine stones, some in wolf form, others human. Pack members fought alongside royal guards against black-clad attackers wielding silver weapons. In the center of it all, a massive black wolf stood surrounded by 5 hunters, his silver eyes blazing with defiance despite the blood matting his fur. Alaric. Even in wolf form, I recognized him instantly. He was magnificent, larger than any wolf I had ever seen, with fur as dark as midnight and those unmistakable silver eyes. He favored his left side, where a deep wound leaked crimson onto the stones. Yet still he fought, teeth bared in a snarl as he lunged at the nearest attacker. I watched in horror as one of the hunters raised a crossbow loaded with a silver-tipped bolt. Time seemed to slow as they took aim at Alaric's heart. Stop. The command tore from my throat louder than I had intended, charged with power that rippled visibly through the air like heat waves off sun-baked stone. Everyone in the courtyard froze, hunters, pack members, royal guards, all rendered immobile by the force of my command. Only their eyes moved, widening in shock as they sought the source of the voice that held them captive. I stepped forward, trembling not with fear, but with the effort of controlling so many at once. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I moved toward Alaric, whose silver eyes tracked my approach with a mixture of awe and concern. Hunters, I said, focusing my power specifically on the black-clad figures. Drop your weapons. The clatter of metal against stone echoed through the courtyard as silver daggers, crossbows, and swords fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. Kneel, I continued, my voice growing with the strain. The hunters dropped to their knees, expressions contorted with rage and disbelief at their bodies' betrayal of their wills. I turned to the pack members and royal guards next. You are free to move, but do not harm the kneeling hunters unless they resist. The invisible bonds holding our allies released, causing several to stumble in surprise. Murmurs swept through their ranks as they stared at me with new eyes, recognition dawning as they connected the mute-serving girl with the powerful Omega before them. Finally, I faced Alaric, who remained in wolf form, his silver eyes never leaving mine. "You can move now," I said softly, directing my words only to him. The great black wolf shuddered as my command released him. He limped toward me, leaving bloody paw prints on the stones before shifting smoothly into his human form. Pack magic ensured he wasn't left naked. Black pants materialized as he transformed, though his chest remained bare, revealing the full extent of his injuries. A deep gash ran from his left shoulder down across his ribs, sluggishly leaking blood despite his enhanced healing. "Lyra," he said, my name a reverent whisper on his lips. Something in his voice made my heart stutter. Before I could respond, however, slow applause cut through the tense silence of the courtyard. "Magnificent," came a cold, cultured voice. "Everything I was promised and more." A man stepped forward from the shadows of the eastern archway. Unlike the other hunters, he wore no fighting leathers, but a tailored suit as dark as sin. His face might have been handsome if not for the cruel twist of his mouth and the emptiness in his pale blue eyes. "Matthias," Alaric growled, instinctively moving to stand between me and the newcomer. "Alpha King," the man, Matthias, acknowledged with a mocking bow. "How fortunate that you've delivered exactly what I came for." I felt Alaric tense beside me. "You're the leader of the Silencers." "Leader, founder, visionary," Matthias shrugged elegantly. "I prefer collector, personally. And your little Omega is the crowning jewel I've sought for a decade." "You'll never touch her," Alaric snarled, his voice deepening with the wolf rising beneath his skin. Matthias smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. "I already have." He raised his hand, and I suddenly noticed the small dart gun concealed in his palm. Before anyone could react, he fired. I felt a sharp sting in my neck, my hand flying up to pull out a tiny feathered dart. "What?" I swayed. A sudden dizziness washed over me. "A special blend," Matthias explained conversationally. "Designed specifically to neutralize Omega abilities. Temporary, of course. I wouldn't want to damage such valuable merchandise permanently." I tried to command him to stop, to freeze, to drop dead on the spot, but the words turned to ash in my mouth, my power slipping away like water through cupped hands. Alaric caught me as my knees buckled, lowering me gently to the ground. His face swam above mine, contorted with rage and fear. "What have you done to her?" "Simply leveled the playing field," Matthias replied. He snapped his fingers. And suddenly, a dozen more hunters appeared from the shadows, these armed with strange-looking guns that hummed with an unnatural blue light. "Wolf's bane gas," Matthias explained, noting Alaric's wary glance. "One pull of the trigger, and every wolf in this courtyard will be paralyzed within seconds. Except for me, of course." He smiled again. "I've developed an immunity." Alaric's arms tightened around me as he assessed our options. I could feel the tension in his body, the desperate calculation behind his silver eyes. He was a king responsible for everyone here. He couldn't risk all their lives for one Omega, even if she was me. "Let her go," Matthias continued, "and I'll spare your pack. Fight, and I'll take her anyway over your dead bodies." I clutched weakly at Alaric's arm, trying to communicate with my eyes what my voice no longer could. "Don't sacrifice everyone for me." The conflict in his expression was agonizing to witness. Then something shifted in his eyes. A decision reached. "Take me instead," he said, his voice steady with deadly purpose. Matthias raised an eyebrow. "You? What use would I have for an Alpha King? Political leverage, ransom, territory negotiations." Alaric's grip on me never wavered. "I'm worth more than one Omega, no matter how rare." The hunter's pale eyes gleamed with sudden interest. "A tempting offer. But why not both of you?" "Because I'll come willingly," Alaric countered. "No resistance, no tricks. But she stays here under the protection of my pack." I tried to protest, shaking my head weakly, but the drug had rendered me almost completely immobile. Tears of frustration burned my eyes as I realized what he was doing, sacrificing himself for me, a woman he barely knew. Matthias appeared to consider the offer, tapping one finger against his chin thoughtfully. How remarkably noble, he said finally. But I'm afraid I must decline. The girl comes with me. His eyes hardened. Though I appreciate your willingness to cooperate, which is why I'll allow you to live. For now. He gestured, and 2 hunters stepped forward, weapons trained on Alaric. Release her, Matthias commanded. Or watch your wolves die one by one. To demonstrate his point, he nodded to one of his men, who turned and fired at a young pack member standing at the edge of the courtyard. The wolf crumpled with a cry of agony, his body convulsing as the wolf's bane entered his system. Next will be your beta, Matthias said coolly. Then your delta. I know the hierarchy of your pack, Alaric. I know exactly how to hurt you. I felt Alaric's chest rise and fall with a deep breath. Then, with infinite gentleness, he lowered me to the ground, his hands lingering on my shoulders. I will find you, he whispered fiercely, his silver eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my heart race despite the drug dulling my senses. No matter where he takes you, no matter how long it takes, I will find you. He pressed something into my palm. My grandmother's pendant, returned as promised. Then he stood, backing away with his hands raised in surrender. Matthias smiled in satisfaction. A wise choice, Alpha King. 2 hunters approached, roughly hauling me to my feet. My legs wouldn't support me, and I sagged between them, my head lolling forward as the drug continued to work through my system. Consider this a business transaction, Matthias said to Alaric. I acquire what I need, and in exchange, your pack survives. We'll be leaving now, and I suggest no one follows unless they wish to die quite painfully. As they began dragging me away, I managed to turn my head just enough to catch one last glimpse of Alaric. He stood tall despite his injuries, his face a mask of controlled fury, silver eyes promising vengeance. Around him, his pack members vibrated with the same barely contained rage, held back only by their alpha's silent command. The last thing I saw before they bundled me into a waiting black vehicle was Alaric shifting back into his massive wolf form, throwing his head back in a howl that contained all the anguish and promise I felt in my own heart. Then darkness claimed me,